The second thing I'm asking for, we've had term limits for presidents of the United States for nearly 75 years after the Truman administration. And I believe we should have term limits for Supreme Court justices of the United States as well.
So you're not going to be able to do that without a constitutional amendment. And then you got to go through a lot of stuff. You have all the state legislatures that have to ratify everything. It's not going to get past a single threshold. That was Biden yesterday talking about his plan to revamp. It's a way for them to pack the Supreme Court because they're mad that they weren't able to shape it because they lost elections. Welcome back to the program. Dana Loesch here with you. One of the things that I noticed too is that let me pull this up. It was a Washington Post piece that was back a couple of years ago. And they were saying that it's just not going to happen. The situation with term limits and Biden, it's not going to happen with the Supreme Court reform because they had his little reform commission. You know, they keep trying these completely. I know a lot of people are saying, well, it's just demagoguery. So you can't, take it seriously. Yes and no. It's demagoguery, but it's also what they want to do and what they're going to try to do. And it hasn't been going well for quite some time because the Washington Post even knows that the commission that was created, his little Supreme Court commission, wasn't to actually get any kind of quote unquote tangible action, which I thought was fascinating. I mean, it's just they're just trying to make some noise and make it look like they're doing something, but they really want to do it. I mean, you have to have a constitutional amendment. And that's a process that completely eliminates the participation of the executive. You have 2/3 votes in both chambers of Congress, ratifications by 3/4 of the states, and that's 38 out of 50. So that's 38 states as legislatures that have to ratify this, and they have their own litmus tests. And it is some partisan demagoguery. I get it, but at the same time, it's one that they're going to try to figure out how to get around this and make this a possibility as much as they can. And by the way, the term limit thing, you're supposed to have, and I think actually Ron DeSantis went at this earlier. He was explaining it quite well. The term to enforce term limits is bad for the country and not what the founders envisioned for a couple of reasons. He touches on it here on audio soundbite 16. Listen.
Washington federal level or not?
So here's the thing, honestly, on the 18-year term limit for justice, so founders, if you go back and read the founders, they said you're going to serve during good behavior, which basically meant lifetime appointment unless you did something to get you impeached and removed from office. And they thought that was important because they wanted the judiciary to be insulated from the passions of the day, that enforcing the Constitution when it's popular to do so is not that big of a deal. You just follow the wind. It's tough when enforcing the Constitution cuts against the currents of public opinion. And so they wanted to insulate them from having to even worry about it. So something like a retention election would not make sense as the founders understood it. Florida's Constitution is not really the people that framed that were not necessarily in sync with our founding fathers when they did the U.S. Constitution. So the whole idea of retention election is undercuts what the founders wanted to do on that. Age limits, if you're going to do it for everybody in office. If you want to do 75, don't just apply it to justices, apply it to Congress, apply it to the executive. If you're going to do that, that would be one thing. But I don't see how you could say, so an 18-year limit, you'd serve for 18 years, you'd have a fixed term, you wouldn't stand for retention or anything like that. Honestly, I don't know that really, they don't like the court now because they're on the wrong side of ruling.
Yeah, and that's absolutely true. And that's one of the reasons why you had these life appointments. We are a republic, so we are a system of law. We are a system of laws. We have a construct of rules. We've had this since the 1780s. And these rules show the process for forming the Supreme Court and making the determination as to who sits on the bench. So if you're winning elections, you can nominate justices. And when you are able to take over the Senate, you're able to confirm those justices, and they serve for life. Now, this fix, having it sit at 9 justices, that's what our system of rules is. And now Biden and Harris, what amazes me, and I had a friend bring this up, Biden and Harris, they accused Trump of trying to break the rules in our republic, but yet that's what Biden and Harris are looking to do right here. They're refusing to accept the way that our republic is constructed. And they think, I guess, that by attempting to go about this, it's never going to happen with 38 states and the ratification, it's never going to happen that way. They think that somehow by their doing it through DC, that it makes it more virtuous, as opposed to what they say that Trump tried to overthrow the government in the process through rioting in a mob for January 6th. But tell me about riots and mobs when you have Justice Kavanaugh, who has death threats, and they have to have security on the street to his house. I mean, let's look at the increased number of death threats to Supreme Court justices because of the unruly, riotous mob that's kickstarted by the left. So they've written about, I always tell people, you need to read the Federalist Papers to understand everything from the militia to the way that our Senate really should be selected, term limits, because I agree with the founders as it pertains to term limits. And that I'm against them because I agree with what Adams and Hamilton and everyone else have said, that your vote is the term limit. They also wrote quite a bit about Supreme Court and the Supreme Court justices, and Federalist 78, getting into the Judiciary Department, which Hamilton noted. Everything from the way it's constructed, talking about the good behavior, et cetera, which is something we're going to talk about in a moment. But he writes in Federalist 78, the complete independence of the courts of justice is peculiarly essential in a limited constitution. And by limited constitution, he says, I understand one which contains certain specified exceptions to legislative authority, such, for instance, as that it shall pass no bills of attainder, no ex post facto law, and the like. Limitations of this kind can be preserved in practice no other way than through the medium of courts of justice, whose duty it must be to declare all acts contrary to the manifest tenor of the Constitution void. Without this, all the reservations of particular rights and privileges would amount to nothing. He's talking about how it is the protector of individual rights, the way that our system is set up. And this is one of the reasons why the left is so adamant in attacking it. The appointment for life, things like this, making it separate from legislative bodies and preserving the purity of their decision, as DeSantis had said, to protect from the passion of the time, is incredibly important. And one of the things that Biden had actually put out, and I wanted to touch on this as well, because he was saying, what was it, like good behavior, Kane? Like I'm pulling up my notes here. One of the caveats, because he had three proposals, he was talking about term limitations, and he was talking also about, good behavior and, the terms and of behavior, which is entirely, completely arbitrary. And the reason I bring that up is this. He is saying that justices must abide by a code of conduct, and he wants that reformed and strengthened as one of the three ways to overhaul the Supreme Court. What have they been talking about, like, since spring, all going through the summer? Who's the one justice that they've been going on and on about? The flag outside of that justice's house? Alito. Alito's wife flew a military authorized flag. And the left says that because it indicates that perhaps they are not as left as the left is, or cannot be persuaded to lean left, then that somehow is a breach of a code of conduct, and they wanted Alito to recuse himself, and they wanted him out of all this stuff. It's so incredibly arbitrary because the left makes the determination that anything that does not conform to their views, to their policies, to their world perspective is a breach of a code of conduct, which is ever changing depending on where they stand on a particular issue at any given time. And that's not even consistent. Do you realize the danger of creating such an arbitrary rule like this that goes completely against what the founders discussed in the Federalist Papers and in their correspondence to each other about protecting these justices from those passion of the times? And that's what DeSantis was quoting, by the way. Do you understand how having a completely progressive, determined code of conduct that is entirely decided by what a progressive feels like on any given issue, how ridiculously dangerous and stupid and bipartisan that is? How do you expect to have any kind of due process or any kind of anything determined in a country where you can control the highest court in the land like this, where they want to make these justices subject to penalty of not bending the knee? That's what this is all about. This is upending our system of rules. It is an anti-republic motion. And for all the talk they have about January 6th, and we've heard nothing about that, they want to downplay even the attempted assassination of the president. What they're proposing here is just that. But they think somehow that it's more virtuous because they're discussing it in the halls of Congress, which actually makes it scarier, if you want to be honest about it. I mean, riots in the streets is one thing. Riots like this with smiles and applause isn't something entirely different. I mean, you're destroying the outcome of the process in our republic. They are unhappy that they missed out on the opportunity to nominate justices, and they want to upend that and completely redo the system because they do not like the outcome of the rules. That is what this is. And the courts, as I was discussing in Federalist 78 with Hamilton, that is not how the courts are to be treated. That is not how SCOTUS is to be treated, nor is it to be viewed. And it's really hard for me to take seriously the left when they preach about endlessly democracy, our democracy's under attack. It's under attack by you. You have attacked it. I mean, the job of the justices, he noted, requires a great expertise. And that it is because of that, a life tenure, he says, would help recruit the best lawyers to the court. And it would also help all of us deepen our knowledge allow them to deepen their knowledge over a long tenure. And so this is not something that should be wielded as political penalty because they're not conforming with the far left. And that's what it is. And like how and in the Washington Post, there's this op-ed that, let me pull this up, forgive me. This op-ed that ran from Joe Biden, his opinion on this. He goes back to term limits for the presidency over 75 years ago. By the way, the 22nd Amendment was the restoration of what had been normal that had been upended by FDR. In fact, I think that's like my little note on my book when I was formulating this segment today. That's incredibly dishonest to present it as otherwise. It was a return to the normalization that was entirely upended by FDR. So I don't know what he's trying to get in, what he's trying to do with that, Biden in that op-ed with the Washington Post. But that's a stupid comparison. It's a stupid comparison that demonstrates a complete lack of, which is typical for Biden. I don't know if you've seen, I've never played it on air because it's so long, but I think we did play some of it when Biden was lecturing Clarence Thomas during Thomas's hearings. And you could tell Biden had no clue what he was talking about. And Thomas, he's there in the hearing and what is he going to do? He's got to sit there and listen to him. And he's prattling on, showing his ass as Biden is wont to do. And Thomas is sitting there. Biden has demonstrated time and time again, he has no concept, no grasp on these issues. So for him to sit here and be like, well, and that's what he actually wrote. He wrote, President, we got the term limits for this. And so it makes sense. It's two entirely different things. And the term limitations was a restoration of that. And they laid out in the Federalist Papers why they're different. It's really embarrassing to live in a country sometimes where you have such an uneducated party in charge. I mean, I love my country. My country doesn't embarrass me, but some of our leaders sure as hell do.